Welcome to episode 4 of the Busa Riding God King podcast. I'm your host, Dante, aka Chris, who introduces the podcast every single time. All right. So today we have a very special guest. His name is Jeremy, but I prefer to call him Jer Bear. Would you say hi for us, Jer Bear?
Hey there, everyone.
Awesome. And we still have Adam and Daniel in the cast. Could you guys say a little something?
Hey, it's me.
Hi, I'm Daniel.
Thanks, guys. All right, so today we're going to be talking about one of the commandments, which is to have zero dependencies in life. Okay, and now what does this mean? Well, in the physical realm, it means that if every morning you get up and you cannot function as a human being without taking your morning coffee, you have become dependent upon coffee. But the dependencies also extend to the mental. If you are too attached to a specific routine or a specific person or a specific action mentally, and you're like, oh, I couldn't live without you or something like that, you've become too dependent on this other presence. And as far as the Busas go, even though it's good to have connections with other people, you should rely and be dependent on yourself first and foremost. And I believe that is the start to this tenet of the Busa way.
Well, isn't that a bit contradictory? You're saying have zero dependencies in life, but you're also saying be dependent on yourself and only yourself. So is that an exception?
I understand that language-wise, there's definitely a barrier there, because I'm saying have zero dependencies, and then I'm saying the only thing you should be dependent upon is yourself, and yourself is a thing. However, if you can't even be dependent, being dependent on yourself is honestly one of the most important parts of the Busa way. You have to be able to rely on yourself to make the right choices in these situations, to live by the Busa way. If you can't rely on yourself, then this path is too difficult to take. So
I got a reinterpretation on this. How about minimize external dependency, maximize internal dependency?
I like that because I feel like all of human culture kind of is networking and depending on other people, at least to some extent.
That's a good point.
Don't get me wrong. You need to be independent, be able to have your own job, support yourself, or anyone that you care about, and pay the bills so that you can actually live life.
that is a very good point, Jeremy. I think that the wording of this could have been chosen better, and I will take the full blame of this. But I think that the important part of this tenet is that I think the word reliant is better here. That if you become reliant on something, it's kind of in a way a weakness. You know, if you can't do a workout without tanking 5 scoops of pre-workout before your workout, what are you going to do when you don't have your pre-workout? You're not going to work out, right? And that automatically will take you off the path.
What about minimize external physical dependency or reliancy? Because it's having a workout partner, right? You're not exactly reliant on them. But for me, if I'm going to bench heavy, I am reliant on somebody else. Somebody needs to help spot me and lift me off.
That makes sense. But also, I think that, let's say you and I, Daniel, started running together every day. There's a difference between becoming dependent and relying on you and being happy that you're there. Like, I'm grateful if you show up and we do the run together, right? Like today, I'm having 2 people over to do leg day with me. I'm very grateful and happy that they're going to be with me doing leg day. But if those motherfuckers don't show up, I'm still going to do leg day because I'm not, I guess the term would be fully dependent, or I don't know, 100% reliant on, you're not going to do it without them kind of thing. You need it. Like, it's a necessity in your mind.
Yeah, so it could be mentally or emotionally dependent, not just physically dependent, like an addiction per se.
It's the avoidance of excuse. You don't want to utilize things as an excuse because you've become comfortable with them. Like Chris was saying, if you get into a routine with someone for running every day and then one day they're like, oh, I'm sick, I can't run, most people will just say, oh, I guess I just won't run today. but you have to be able to realize that that is simply an excuse and go running anyways.
Yes, I actually want to contradict myself completely because I said to have zero dependencies. That's very improper wording. I like that we're breaking it down now through this talk, but because I'm actually very dependent and reliant on a schedule. Now, if I break my schedule, I will still do the things that I need to do for the day, like workout and all that kind of stuff. But when I'm fully in schedule, I'm very dependent on the schedule to keep me like 100% on track, right? And if there's a day where like um, I don't know, I stay up too late or I get sick or something and I don't go to work and then I have all this random free time that's just thrown at me and I'm completely out of the loop. Like I didn't wake up early and do like my morning yoga and like eat my breakfast. Like I didn't go through the normal motions of the morning and then follow the general routine of the day. It kind of throws me for a loop, right? So I'm kind of dependent, reliant on my schedule. However, I think that in the end, what Adam is saying is completely correct. That if you don't do something because of the absence of some other thing, like pre-workout, a friend, um, I don't know, a morning message from your relationship partner, whatever it may be that you're like holding on to so desperately, it's just going to be an excuse.
I see where you're coming from.
I'm trying to think about general relationships. I think Chris's stance on relationships kind of plays against it. But I was thinking about the traditional idea of making a life with somebody, right? And if they were ever to leave it, it does tear out a significant portion of it. In that scenario, would you say it's better to be ready for them to leave you at any moment? Or is it okay to be vulnerable and to say that you rely on them for some of the things? Or if I move in with somebody and our apartment is more than my salary, but together we can afford it, should I ever take an action like that?
I am going to jump in here for sure on this because no, 100% no on the if your roommate, like if you can't afford it on your own and you move in with a roommate that has a higher salary. The reason that I say this is because, I mean, Daniel and Jeremy both know our good friend Alex had a stroke, and so half his body was paralyzed and stuff. And I mean, he could have died, right? So life is not guaranteed. So even if the other person 100% has your intentions, like you move in with a roommate that's making more money than you, but he doesn't mind going halvesies or going 70-30 on the rent so you guys can live together and you're completely reliant on him and everything's going smooth and dandy until he walks out of the fucking apartment and gets hit by a bus, right? So in those cases, like you would be fucked, right? Like, what are you going to do for the next 7 months of your lease, where you can't pay, right? Unless he left you in his will or something, and even then, he's not going to be working, so it's just you're gonna have to be living off the money he already had, right? Um, that's as far as like roommates go, and then as far as relationship and building a future with someone, I used to do that with a few of my relationship partners, and where are they now? They're not around now. It's not necessarily impossible, but people change, as we grow year to year, we change our beliefs, our value systems, what we want, what we like, what we don't like. And so latching yourself onto someone else for the like forever timeline is not necessarily the best idea if you don't keep in mind that it's not actually forever, I think that there's no problem if you bind yourself to someone and start building a future, but you keep your own stable base. You know what I mean? Like you have to be able to financially, not necessarily have to be able to financially take care of yourself, but if your partner suddenly vanishes, you should have like a fire escape plan. You know what I mean? For your life, you should have some sort
I
of
have
plan and set
a
in motion.
quote. I have a quote that's relevant to this from Lil Wayne. If you can't afford to buy something twice, you shouldn't buy it.
That is fucking amazing, actually. So Daniel, do you have anything to respond to what I just said?
Only on the topic of trust, and I agree with the idea of having a backup plan. I carry a bug out bag just in case power goes out. Honestly, something like that. A bunch of knives,
That's
whittling.
just Miami things.
Yeah, medic bag, first aid kit, things like that. I always carry stuff like that just in case. I'm a little. I don't like the word paranoid. I guess prepared.
No,
'Cause if it happens, it won't
it's
be
super
paranoid.
important. I have like a little cardboard box in my bathroom that it's just filled with medical supplies, and a lot of people need to realize that these things are important. Like if you get hurt inside your house and you're bleeding out, you need to have a way to stop that bleeding, or you at least like treat yourself before heading to a hospital.
Yeah, the only time when you want to go buy a plunger is when you need it, right? You should already have one. So for my thing, I think the older quote, not a man is not an island, or a man cannot be an island, right? Or a solitary, or an individual alone without any dependency on the people around him. The idea that you belong to your community, and in the same way your community helps you out. I have a problem with this. I'm not sure where it's coming from, but I think that the idea of trust between two individuals is extremely important. Just as a moral, or as a value, or as an idea, that the ability to trust an individual and to become dependent on them, and them dependent on you in turn, I think is beautiful, vital. I'm not sure what word I would use here.
It's beautiful, but I feel like it has the potential to be good or bad. Like,
Yeah, most things have the potential to be good or bad.
hmm and it can be hard to draw the line between. Like, if you guys don't know, like my current girlfriend that's living with me in my apartment, like right after we first met, she had like a medical disorder that no one has been able to figure out. It's kind of like seizures, but not because she's fully aware. It comes and goes. Um, and she's like sometimes had to become dependent on me as a caretaker to, like, at least in the beginning, carry her up and down the stairs, or just like constantly try to support her, or like even just keep her in my apartment for the past year. But I believe it is a good thing, because if you look at like what she's doing now, like learning coding, like applying to like multiple jobs, trying to become like self-sufficient, it's the codependence, quote unquote, has been like useful for progressing as both forward, increasing both of our networks and like skills, um, and in the attempt of trying to become better people.
If you're physically incapable of not having dependencies, are you just not physically fit for the Busa path?
I don't think so necessarily. I do see where you're coming from here, because that's why I think the wording of the have zero dependencies was incorrect, because that's not exactly what I was trying to say by that. In the case of you and me, for example, Adam, when we first were talking here in Miami and discussing the Busa ways, um, it's not like we were dependent on each other, but in a way, I allowed myself to be dependent on you, but I still had a backup plan. Like I would ask you to come over in the morning and wake me up, and then we'd work out together. But I still had my alarm set in case you didn't come in the morning, and I would just work out after work instead of in the morning, right? So
Yeah, which happens sometimes.
yeah, which happens sometimes. But I was dependent on you, right? And I also knew that if I very specifically said, Adam, I need you to wake me up tomorrow, like it's absolutely a necessity, right? Like I fucked up and I stayed up too late and it's a super mad emergency, like then I wouldn't even have to put my alarms, like with you, I'm at that level of trust where I know that you will understand if I say it so specifically that it's serious. Like if I vocally tell you the gravity of a situation, I know it's going to pass on to you, right? So if I'm like, Adam, this is super serious, all of a sudden it's super serious for you, right? And if I'm like, oh, Adam, it's no big deal, I know that you automatically know it's no big deal, right? And that's out of the trust relationship that we have, and the fact that I can rely on you and I can be dependent on you. But if you like, my mind has the like 1% mentality of, something can happen to Adam. Adam is not an eternal godly being. I mean, you are pretty godly, but he's not an eternal godly being that is not able to die, not able to like decide to change his mind about having me as a friend and move along. Like, there's plenty of things that could happen in that case, right? So I'm still gonna go and do my own things, even if that dependency is gone. And as far as the physical dependency, right? If you have to rely on someone else, like let's say you don't have arms, so you have to rely on someone else to like move you around and feed you and whatever, right? I think you can still be Busa, just you're going to be limited. You know, obviously there's certain things you can't do because you don't have arms, but I think you can be very Busa. It's just you're going to have that full reliance on someone else. And actually, I think it's going to make you more of a Busa in the sense that part of the Busa way is that um, once you become a Busa, right, and you're on the path completely, right? And the group has like you've undergone some sort of trial and you're part of the way. You can rely on all the other people that are officially Busas basically with your life pretty much, you know. Like I can trust Adam, like Adam, I need you to send me a text tomorrow at exactly 3:33 p.m. or I'm going to die, and I fucking know that I'm going to get a text at 3:33 p.m. tomorrow by Adam, and I feel comfortable telling anybody else in this chat, assuming that I convey that it's actually serious and I'm actually going to die if you don't send me a text at 3:33 p.m. I feel very confident that the three of you would send me the text at that time, you know. Even Jeremy, who has a habitual habit of being late to things and not being very time conscious, I know that if I convey to him the
Hey,
severity
he was
of
on
it, he would
time
do it.
today.
I know it doesn't matter. I'm saying that's even with that, I know he would do it. You get me?
For dependency, then the only problem is that it has a chance of not working out. Is that
Yes.
what it is?
That's actually exactly what it is.
So having a backup or a second or a third or a fourth, or having other opportunities or other things that you can do if something does go wrong, does that solve it? Could you then become dependent? Or would you not define that as dependent?
So I personally wouldn't define that as dependent, but I guess technically, yeah, you'd still be dependent. It allows for the dependence because you have the backup plan. I think that's the more. I think you put it perfectly right there, Daniel. Is that part of the boost away is you always have that to fall back on. You always have your own path and the shit that you're gonna do anyway to fall back on. You know, if all the other dependencies fall through, you always have your own path to come back to.
You will keep moving regardless of what happens.
Yeah. And in that way, I feel like preparation isn't the same as dependency or even the same as like paranoia. Something is going to happen. Because I've kind of always felt like Murphy's Law is such a thing that happens like all the time. Like something that can go wrong will go wrong. And so if you're at least prepared in the tiniest of ways, even if it's like being able to have your phone to look up on Google, how do I fix or deal with this, is an aid and not a dependency, quote unquote.
Well, literally, would you be dependent on that aid?
Yeah, it comes down to the words, right? Or the way that these words come across.
In the event of tragedy, I mean, I guess so. Just like you'd be dependent on a life vest. And in that case, is it good or bad? I mean,
We're
if you
dependent
judge it
on
based on
like
if you
food, water,
survive.
air.
Oh,
You know?
yeah, we are dependent on certain things all the time, like gravity, but we're specifically talking about things we can control.
Important distinction.
So the distinction here is, can you control, like if you have a medical condition that forces you to, let's say you're blind and you have a guide dog or something like that, can you control that? Is that something that you really have any control over? Because
It
that's
has to do with your baseline then, right? Or whatever your default state of being is.
Yeah, I think that's completely correct. I think that as far as the dependencies go, in a situation like that, you can't control your blindness. You know, I mean, it obviously depends, right? If you're born blind, you can't control your blindness, right? If you became blind due to some accident out of your own stupidity, then you could have controlled your blindness and like you made the mistake, right? And if it's just some freak accident that you had no control over, I mean, at that once you're blind, you have no like you can't unblind yourself. You know what I mean? And I think that's the important distinction with dependency that I want to make is that there are certain people who are, let's say, in a relationship and they're like, oh, I can't live without you. And they say things like that, but they don't really necessarily mean them a lot of the time, you know? If the relationship gets forced away from them and their relationship partner just goes to ever living shit out of them, it like slaps them awake and like it's painful as fuck. But after a few weeks, a few months, whatever, they kind of like realize, hey, wait a minute, I can live without you. Like I'm back to my normal life. You know, just it took a while. You know, some people it takes years. Some people it takes half their lifetime. You know, but I think it's important to realize that in the Busa way, you need to be able to take those dependencies, and when you have control over them, you need to exercise that control. And then once you've like kind of broken the little string that's attaching you to that thing or person or whatever, quickly kind of heal yourself, I guess, or like strengthen yourself up so that you
Or
can
be ready for
reattach. I don't know, or be ready for it. Yeah.
I think another way to put this is control all the variables in your life.
That you can control. Yeah.
Right. Well,
I think that completely makes sense.
So controlling the variables of your life. That's another way to say have zero dependencies of your life. Saying the words have zero dependencies in your life is like a romanticized version of what we're really trying to say.
Yeah, because it's hard to know the difference between what you can and can't control, and what is and isn't, quote unquote, a random chance or fate.
So this is about having an internal locus then.
Yes, completely. I'm gonna take this on a slight bit of a tangent actually because of what you just said, Daniel, with the internal
Please.
part. This is kind of what this is reminding me of. The more we talk about this, is I was watching a poker tournament the other day on YouTube, and then I was scrolling through the comments, and some people were like calling out this one player, like, "Oh, he's just so lucky all the time, and like he always lands these hands, and blah 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 blah, all this kind of shit. Like he's not good, he's just lucky." And like I'm like, that's Daniel fucking Negreanu. He has 12 World Series of Poker Championship bracelets. Like, you think he just lucked his way into 12 fucking bracelets? Why don't you go try that, right?
Very
It's
lucky,
because
man.
they don't realize the slight and minute actions and all the level of thinking, strategy, reading other players, all of that goes into it. That yes, of course, luck is an element, right? If like the god of unluckiness decided to curse him and he had the worst luck imaginable. I mean, if he gets 2-7 offsuit every single hand, which is the worst hand in poker, he's never going to be able to win a World Series of Poker bracelet, right? But that would have to be some crazy, like, this world is a simulation glitch, right? And a lot of people tend to attribute things to an external problem. Like, something happens in their life and they're like, oh, that's not my fault. It's because of X. It's because of Y. It's because of Z. And X, Y, and Z are all external things. And they don't think to themselves, well, maybe I could have put on sunscreen and I wouldn't have a fucking sunburn. Or maybe I could have thought that, if I go on a fishing trip on a boat and it's a couple hours long, maybe I should bring some water to hydrate myself. Maybe I wouldn't be fucking dying right now on this boat, right? Random things like that where having forethought and thinking ahead, right, would benefit you. And when the consequence of the action comes down on you, a lot of people tend to shift the blame to the external instead of looking internally and trying to think of, oh, maybe I should have thought ahead. Maybe I should have prepared.
Reading more on what's at least written on this, it feels like you shouldn't have something or a condition that is fulfilled by something external that you would say like, oh, I'm only going to work out if Jeremy comes today, right? Or I'm only going to let me put it this way: you shouldn't have an only condition attached to something that you want to do that isn't under your control, at least in some aspect, right? Saying like, oh, I'm only going to work out if Chris comes to the gym with me today. Well, if you want to work out and you want to be healthy and you want to do these things, you shouldn't attach an only condition on top of it.
And I feel like that I've had so many like romantic partners and stuff that just they only want to do something, or like they only want to go out to the convenience store or the grocery store like if they have someone else. And like girls will constantly go to the bathroom and travel in packs. And I feel like sometimes like that can be excessive because it does at least seem on the surface like a dependency to like other people and the situation. And if it doesn't go as planned, if it doesn't go as they want it to, then they're just out.
I would love to have somebody go to the bathroom with me every time. I mean, can you imagine? It'd be great. You could talk. We used to do this where we'd sing in the showers together, right? And it was a great time. Or go to the grocery store with someone so that we could talk and have things. But being dissatisfied and letting that get in the way of what you need to do or what you want to do anyways does seem like, because you put so much importance on it, it has a negative effect.
I think that is exactly at the core of this whole thing, and that's exactly what I was trying to communicate in this little blob of the path. Is that um, you know, I've had people where it's like we make some plan with a group of 5 friends, like, all right, we're all gonna go watch this movie, right? And then like one person doesn't go, and then like 3 people drop out of the plan because they were only going to go because that one person was going to go. Or like there's a boyfriend and a girlfriend, and then the girlfriend can't go because her family blah blah blah, and so then the boyfriend doesn't go. And I'm like, bro, why don't you come? Like all the boys are going, like come with us. He's like, yeah, but my girlfriend's going to get mad if I go without her, and yada yada yada. And it's because they kind of attach the it's like they're not doing the plan to do the plan. They're doing the plan to do something with their significant other, and then they won't do it without their significant other. Like that kind of, I don't know, it kind of hampers you, as you were saying.
There's another side to it. If it's not even just, oh, I'm going because this person's going, it's I'm not going because someone else isn't going, so I'm going to use that as an excuse to also not go. You're on the fence about going out this night to go to like a bar with your friends, and then one of your friends says he can't make it, and then you're like, oh, he can't make it, that's good, I'm not going to go either. Then you don't really care whether that guy is going or not. You just care that someone's not going, and then there's your excuse not to go.
Correct. That could be something if you're on the fence 100%, like if you're not 100% about a plan, right? But that's part of the thing, is like that's part of the whole live by your word thing. Is like if I'm gonna say, hey Adam, like let's go to the movies tomorrow night. Like I really want to go see a movie with you tomorrow night, right? Now that I've said that, it's what I mean. And if you're like, yeah, sure, sounds fucking awesome, I expect you to not be just bullshitting me and then last minute on Friday be like, oh, sorry, dude, I can't make it. And the whole time your intention was to flake on me in the first place, right? Like that's my general trust in other people. Now, that trust has been violated hundreds of times throughout my life, obviously, but it's just the general inherent trust that I tend to have in people, especially people that I call my friends. So in the case that it's a group of friends or a group of Busas that I'm going out with, I don't expect this to necessarily happen. However, it could be that, let's say all the 4 of us are going to go out. And let's say I've been seeing Daniel and Jeremy like every day for the past 2 weeks. Now, me personally, I really wouldn't care, but most people, like, they get like quote unquote sick of people. I know Jeremy, like, you got to recharge after you interact with someone for too long. And I remember like when Jeremy was here for he was here for like 2 weeks or something. Like the first couple days we were just going nuts, and then one day he kind of just did his own thing the whole day, and I did my own thing the whole day, and then we just kept going nuts the rest of the time. But like he needed a day to like kind of just be away for a little bit, right? So for me, if we were in that situation, and let's say I hadn't seen Adam in a while, and then the 4 of us made a plan together, if Adam doesn't show up to the plan, he's the one I initially wanted to see. The whole reason I made the plan was to see Adam. So now that Adam's not going, it's like, well, fuck, I don't necessarily, like, I wasn't attached to the plan. I was attached to seeing Adam and not the actual plan itself. So that's kind of the distinction that I think some people have sometimes.
Yeah, I think this is just a conflict that most people have between not saying what they mean when they get an invitation to somewhere, right? If you're gunning for someone and they have a check mark like they're going, and then they cancel. And you're like, well, I didn't really want to go to the party, but and then you cut back afterwards as a result. I think that's fine. It's just you need to. Oh God, it gets into such a gray area where it's like, are you gonna tell the person who invited you that you're going only if this other person goes, or should you just not go in general?
We are very off topic.
Close
Correct.
to off topic.
I would say in that case that you would
Because we're talking about living by your word right now.
But and the conflict that it comes in with making plans and the dependencies that you have about those plans. But this is more of like a value judgment that goes on in your own head, right?
Yeah.
It's taking the word dependency and moving it all over the place.
yeah. Daniel's just finding different places where dependency can be thrown in to see it's kind of like you're bug testing in a fucking code. I think in this situation, personally, what I would do is I would just be on the fence. Like I would tell the person, like, "Hey, I might show up," right? I wouldn't give them a straight up yes, and I wouldn't give them a straight up no. I'd be like, "I might show up," and then when that person flakes, I'm just like, "Hey, yeah, I'm not gonna make it," and then that's that. That way, they're not like. And I would probably add a little disclaimer, like I wouldn't bank on me showing up, right? Because I don't want to give them that. I hate when people give me the confidence, like, "Yeah, I'll be there," and then they don't show up. It's very disheartening,
Okay.
Mhm.
Adam, where would you wrap this back to?
That's hard to say. I guess I would wrap this back to the choice of, choosing your battles.
I meant in terms of like, where would you bring us back if we were talking about something?
Well, I am. I'm trying to stay a little bit relevant to what we were just talking about because there is some good point there. But if we're talking about dependencies, if we're talking about, controlling the variables in your life, we tend to prioritize things based on the moment. And that can be a bit of a problem if we're not thinking long term. So in these instances, we're talking about, making plans with people, trying to go to events and, changing your mind or, making plans with someone and then them leaving and you no longer wanting to go to the plan. You have to think of that beforehand. You have to be able to say, okay, I want to see Adam. I'm not going to go to the movies because I don't want to go to the movies. I just want to see Adam. So I'm just going to go to Adam's house, or I'm going to have Adam come to my house. And that way you're not throwing yourself into a situation on accident. And that's a good way to control your variables is to, like, I have a good example. There is a girl I want to see, but I don't want to, travel 30 minutes into the city on public transit every time I want to see her. So I'll tell her, you can come over to my house, but I don't want to have to go to the city all the time. It's just, it's inconvenient and it's just not what I like to do. And that's how I avoid, dependencies on things I don't want to be dependent on.
I've had exes before where they'll even live across campus, and I'm like, I don't want to go all the way there. But it was hard to even just end the relationship off of that. Like, even if you can tell it's like going off the deep end, it can be hard to end that. Not necessarily the dependence.
Well, this is a different subject. Now you're talking about what do you do when you have a relationship with someone, but it's an inconvenience to see them. That's entirely different. Where I'm just specifically talking about making sure to avoid things you don't want. Control the variables of the situations you're putting yourself in.
Okay, so at least like communicate and be able to make your feelings and opinions clear. I gotcha. Yeah,
It's like figuring out the logistics of a situation, which I think a lot of people don't do. And I think that does actually tie into the dependency thing, is that I'll give you an example. If you're dependent, like in a relationship, if you're dependent on physical interaction, right, with your relationship partner, like meaning that if you're in a relationship with someone, you're dependent on physically interacting with them, then a long distance relationship just logistically does not work for you, right? And people tend to not consider those kind of dependencies. Like they don't tend to consider, oh, you know what, I actually need this. Like my mentally, for my mental health, like if I don't have XYZ, I go kind of nuts. Like I don't like it. I get very depressed, or I get anxious, or whatever it may be. Right. In my case, I struggle without human interaction for a long period of time. Like if I go like literally like 3-4 days with absolutely zero contact from another human being, I get like very antsy. And the first human that I talk to, I'm like, oh my god, this, oh my god, that, and I just fly off the handle. Right. And I think people don't consider that those dependencies that they have um, mentally. And I'll give you an example of me when I was a dumbass. I was on a cruise ship and I met this girl, and we started like talking, and we got into a relationship, right? It was very odd. Like we connected really hard, and we had a really awesome like 6 days on the cruise ship, and then we decided to get into a relationship. All right. Well, it turns out, first of all, she had a boyfriend, so she goes back. She's like, yeah, like let's date, right? And she goes back, and then she breaks up with her boyfriend, and then calls me up, and then admits to me that she's like, yeah, so I just broke up with my boyfriend, and I'm like, wait, what? And then we started dating. And I logistically didn't consider like she's in New Jersey, I'm in Miami. Like, how the fuck is this gonna work out, right? And I completely was not paying attention to like I am dependent in a relationship on physically seeing my relationship partner. So a long distance scenario just it doesn't work for me, right? And it's something where um, having these dependencies will come back to bite me. And if you don't consider those in advance, it's a real problem.
Good idea. Also, the idea that you should, if you are dependent on something for like, let's say a relationship, easiest one, you need something from this relationship, or it's not going to work out. It's much better to be aware of it as well, right? That way, if you so wanted to, you could try to work on it, or at least figure out why you feel that way, or why it is a dependency for you, why it's something you need, and if you don't have it, it will cause whatever it's attached to fail or to not work.
1 billion% actually. I have a friend who his girlfriend went through some issues and like basically started withholding sex from him for like a year, right? And he was going insane. He's like, when I'm in a relationship, I physically require sex from my relationship partner. Like maybe not every day, but at least sometimes, I need to have that physical connection with my partner. And so what he ended up doing is he ended up discussing with his girlfriend, like literally if he could have another person that he was physically intimate with but not emotionally intimate with, and then her that he was emotionally intimate with until she figured out like her issues and dealt with her mental health issues, and then they could just resume, and he could cut the other person off. And I was like so weirded out by that scenario at first. Like, how did you even breach that subject with your girlfriend? But I completely understand that and agree with what you're saying, that it's super important to know your own needs when in any situation, right? Even like even a friendship, right? If like you don't consider someone your friend unless, I don't know, something ridiculous. Like they hit you up with a good morning text and a good night text. Otherwise you don't consider them a friend, right? It's important to know that before you enter a situation where you're gonna start relying or depending on someone as a friend, right? And it's important that they know it as well, because otherwise you're going to have two mismatched expectations. And in a relationship, I think it's completely crucial. And marriage, like, like you better say that at the beginning. Like if you get married to someone and you don't have the conversation about, oh, do you want kids? Like, is that a necessity for you?
Yeah.
Right? Like, oh, you're fucked, right?
And that's just one of the questions, right? I'm sure that there's a bunch of people out there together that don't ask each other hard questions at all, or not even a lot of the ones that they should be asking.
Oh, totally. I completely agree. Because, like, the conversations can be hard and awkward, and some people might not want to, like, hear the answers. And that's why I feel like it's so hard to find that quote unquote, like, perfect 10, because everyone's different. Everybody has their own opinions. And I feel like it kind of comes back to your own ability to accept others.
Okay, hold on. Since we're
I have a whole thing.
since we're so off topic,
This is off,
let's
just end it.
Let's end this. Yeah, let's wrap this up. Chris, you started it. You end it.
All right. So although we went off on a slight bit of a tangent, we covered some interesting
Which is gonna
points
get cut out.
today. No, leave it. Some interesting points today in our phenomenal podcast. Jer Bear was a phenomenal guest. I'm gonna keep using the word phenomenal. because
Adam's
I
a
know it triggers
phenomenal
Adam.
host.
Yeah,
Chris
oh,
is a
damn it, Adam! You
phenomenal
took me
speaker.
out. Oh
I
man.
thought Adam wasn't hosting this one. was
And
he?
Daniel is
Daniel,
a
we're all
phenomenal
hosts.
speaker.
Daniel's a
So,
phenomenal man. Honestly,
yeah.
phenomenal job, everyone. We did,
Man, you know, Adam, you make me feel
Phenomenal
phenomenal.
Chris, you're a phenomenal guy.
Wow. My heart just went doki doki, Adam.
Your heart's a phenomenal thing.
All right. So anyway, thank you for listening to the podcast and all
phenomenal
the
outro.
memes, right? And yeah, this has been my phenomenal outro. Thank you, Adam. And yeah, fuck Craig.
Hey, thank you guys for listening. Fuck you, Craig.
Fuck the police too. Just for the record.